everybody, and welcome to the Colombo's Day Spectacular here at MinnMax. I am your host, Joe Juba, Colombo enthusiast, and I'm joined by Ben Hansen.
What have you done to MinnMax, Joe? Look at us. We're supposed to be relevant, cutting edge, the future of journalism.
See, it's funny you bring that up because I would argue in the last year or so, Colombo's relevance is on the upswing.
Compared to like the day Peter Falk died, maybe. I don't know. What is it? Is it like Gary Whitta tweeting about it or something? Or what's
That's probably a lot of it, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming. And Ross Fund is here too.
Hey, I'll go by Ross the Murder Guy Fund.
Oh, Murder Guy. Oh, that's right, because it's normally the Star Wars guy, right?
Yeah.
I'll insist on it. Ross, welcome to the studio.
I am so excited to be in the studio, and I love it.
Oh, good. Joe, welcome to the MinnMax studio.
Yeah, this is my first time ever. I was never even in the old MinnMax studio. So
really?
No.
That's so wild. Do you enjoy the table? It seems a little familiar, probably.
Say, this looks a lot like the Game Informer.
No,
table.
completely different. This is at least 1 foot shorter. So what are you going to do?
So we're here to, first and foremost, Ben, thank you for indulging me on this.
Hey, you know what? I keep screaming at the cohorts, like, whatever passion project you want, you can pick up the ball and run with it. We want to have that vibe here at MinnMax. And you've been screaming about Colombo for so long. So, well, I guess this is technically a passion project.
So yeah, I mean, it all started when, this particular incarnation started when Ross and I were chatting over at, was it Grumpy's, I think?
Yeah, and we were fighting tooth and nail over who is the better mystery solver, Jessica Fletcher or Lieutenant Colombo.
That's right. As I recall, I won that fight because that's why we're here right now.
Correct.
Talking about Colombo.
Mm-hmm. 2 shows, by the way, I don't think I've ever seen an episode of, so coming in cold here.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I think it'll be good to get, I'm really glad that we have you two guys in particular here. Ben as a newcomer and Ross as someone who I know is a Murder, She Wrote enthusiast.
That is correct. I had not seen an episode of Columbo since I was a kid watching with my parents. So, but having watched 200 some episodes of Murder, She Wrote over the last 10 years of my life, I was surprised and enthused by what I saw in the first episode of Columbo.
Plus, I mean, she loves writing.
Yep.
Columbo in this episode is all about writing.
The title of the episode, Murder by the Book, I was like, oh, that's for sure Murder, She Wrote episode title too, but it shockingly is not.
Really? Yeah. Wow, that is surprising.
Yeah, there's I know there's at least one overlap between Columbo and James Bond episode or James Bond movies also.
Really?
Oh, what's that?
There's a No Time to Die for sure.
Oh, nice.
Interesting.
But anyway, so we are here to dig into technically the first episode of Columbo.
I already have a lot of questions about this.
But calling it the first episode is a little strange because there were 2 sort of like pilot episodes that came before it.
Okay.
And if you watch those, you'll see like Peter Falk's representation of this character is still a little bit in the process of being shaped.
It's basically like the Silmarillion or whatever for Columbo, where it's like there's some ideas there, but it's a mess.
Yeah, I think I think that's actually kind of a fair way to look at it. Okay. It's sort of like think of those as are kind of like the prototypes. And I think this episode is the first time that we come into it and sort of get a full sense of like, oh, that's the character of Columbo. That's the formula of this show.
Yeah, and so I'm still confused. So didn't you say somewhere like it started in 1968, but this episode's in 1971, right? So was it like a couple years of them trying to get this weird thing off the ground?
Yeah, so I'm not... So here's another thing about me and Columbo, real quick, is that like I am a huge enthusiast for the show.
Yeah.
But I kind of deliberately don't get really bogged down in like Columbo trivia.
Huh, okay.
Partially because I find that it's like, that almost feels a little like work to me. Like it often doesn't enhance my enjoyment to know specific details like that as much as just appreciating the sort of like the storytelling and the characters
and appreciating the fashion too, obviously.
And the fashion. Actually, this coat is just really hot. So
for the audio listeners, Joe is dressed up as Columbo. He's wearing a Peter Falk mask. He's doing the whole thing. But I feel like a lot of people watching this, they're confused about a number of things.
Okay.
But you probably give like a brief history of Columbo's Day. What is this? What is happening here?
Right. So we'll start out what happened was I was just looking in my phone once and saw Columbus Day on the calendar, and already being a fan of Colombo, you know how your brain sort of sees things that it wants to see sometimes. Yeah. I saw Columbo's Day, and I told my wife about it. I was just like, oh man, now that's a holiday I'd celebrate.
Right.
And she sort of gave me this puzzled look and was like, you're an adult. You can have a party for that. That's fine. I was like, it was like finally just getting permission to do something really stupid and awesome about Colombo.
Perfect.
Was all I needed. So that was back in 2014.
Jesus.
So I have annually celebrated Columbo's Day around Columbus Day. There's been There's been some flux. One year we had a Colombo ween party instead.
Yeah. Are there any common elements of every Columbo's Day that come into effect?
Well, me wearing this coat is a very common one. I make like party favors and stuff for my friends. This is not a huge party, by the way. It has like, you know.
Come on, you're gonna tell me a Joe Juba party isn't hopping? I refuse to believe it.
Yeah. So, you know, like I have a fairly small group of friends, usually not more than like, 15, 20 people show up for it. And, I make some little like Columbo themed party favors and give those out.
That seems fun. That seems like some good dorky fun.
Yeah. I mean, we watch the episode. I give a little sort of like introduction to add a little context to the episode or
perfect.
whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. People get lost in that Columbo continuity, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it comes from a place of it's just fun to hear people who are knowledgeable and passionate about something talk about that thing, right?
So that's why you've chained all your friends up in the basement.
So this is what I have been told, because I was like, hey, we don't need to sit and listen to me. And everyone's like, no. We like when you take 5 minutes before the episode to just talk about it a little bit, because that means they don't have to do any research. And I can sort of, I don't know, like add
I love
a little bit.
So then you brought it here, and we're going to be dissecting one episode.
Right. Dissecting one episode, murder by the book, though we can also, there's so much about this episode that kind of is representative of the series as a whole.
Okay.
That I think we can also branch out into just sort of like general Columbo trends and things like that.
I am confused, but a couple things. Booted up the episode.
Okay.
Hour and 15 minutes.
Correct. Yep.
So this was like, my Columbo is a show called Survivor. Love Survivor. And so we've been having like weekly Survivor viewing parties for years and years now with my friends. And so after this Wednesday's episode of Survivor, which by the way was a tragedy, my pick Brad got voted out. It was no good. So that means I have to cook for next week. I'm very not excited about it. But after the episode, I was like, hey, does anybody want to watch an episode of Columbo? And the group's reaction was, what is Columbo? Why would we do that? It's like, hey, let's boot it up. And then everybody saw an hour and 15. They're like, what the hell? What kind of old show's hour and 15? So I'm still trying to figure out, is this like is it a bunch of like TV movies? Is that what Columbo is?
Yes.
Okay.
So Columbo in its like origin is, I think they were called the Sunday Night Mysteries. So really it was like a thing that they were showing on NBC and ABC. Now I forget which one it started on. It started on one and then moved to the other. I think it started on NBC.
Sure.
And so it started as this sort of Sunday night mystery movie that they would rotate. So it wasn't always Columbo, but there was always some sort of mystery movie on in this like time slot on Sunday nights.
Gotcha.
So it's funny because when you said an hour 15, for a second I thought you were like, oh, that's so short and digestible because it's a short movie. But no, it is a very long episode of a TV show.
Because my main frame of reference for this is I loved Matlock growing up. I watched a lot of Matlock. And so I think I was expecting more of just kind of the Matlock formula in a bunch of different ways, like as kind of the precursor to Matlock, but it's pretty different from Matlock.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty different from a lot of the mystery shows of the era. And I think that's part of like what made it so popular and what made it stand out. I'm curious, Ross, as someone who is an expert in one mystery show of the era, what was your like first general takeaway?
Well, I was, for one thing, shocked not to see Columbo for the first 25 minutes of the episode. Yes. But I gotta say, it was a refreshing change of format for a mystery show to see the murder happen immediately. Yeah. And then the rest of the episode is just, how does Columbo hassle this guy into slipping up?
Yeah. But that's the thing, because Joe, I know you're a man all about vengeance. You love your Count of Monte Cristo and all that stuff.
It's true, yeah.
And is this the structure of Columbo? That's why it's so satisfying. Because it's not a matter of like trying to solve the mystery on your own, like this choose your own adventure. It's a matter of look at this SOB, this smug blonde piece of work. When's he finally going to get his?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what it is. And I forget exactly where I read this, but I think one of the most accurate descriptions of Colombo that I've ever heard is calling attention to the fact that it's not a whodunit.
Yeah.
It's a how catch 'em.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
like Pokemon.
So yeah, how catch 'em all.
Right.
Yeah, where you in every episode you see the murder happen.
That's so wild.
In every and there are a few like weird outliers here. Where,
yeah, you'd think they'd try to shake it up.
Well, yeah, like for instance, there's one episode where you see the murder happen and you think you know who did it, but surprise, the murderer has an identical twin, so you're not sure which of these two is the real murderer. You know, anyway.
Okay.
But for the most part, you always know who did it, how, and why. Like they just sort all that out at the beginning.
I was waiting for like that Matlock level, like let me put all the pieces together and wow you. Like look at this new concoction I've made. But by the end of the episode, it's just kind of Columbo like going through all the beats that he already explained or already very clear to the audience. I was waiting for like this epiphany. It's like not really an epiphany at the end. It's just kind of like, yeah, remember that moment when I noticed you in the mail? Yeah, that was a clue. Yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
So and I was like, one of the questions I wrote down as I was watching is, how soon did Columbo know this guy did it? Was it from minute one?
Right.
And it kind of seems like it is. He actually says that during the final scene.
Does he?
I knew it was you when blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I'm so happy you brought that up, Ross, because this is one of my favorite questions to like personally answer for myself whenever I watch a Columbo episode is, does Columbo know who the murderer is immediately upon meeting the murderer or prior to meeting the murderer? Because there are a lot of times where it's like, I don't know. I think in this case, he didn't totally have it figured out beforehand, but it's questions like, oh, this guy was murdered, huh? And he had a writing partner. Huh, where's the writing partner now? Oh, he's on his way over. Huh. And then Columbo's like, oh, well, the writing partner did it.
Yeah.
Before he even meets the person, you know?
Right. Seems like the most likely thing.
Yeah.
So first reaction watching this, I watched it with producer Amy, the producer of our old show, MinnMax. And first time that Columbo came on screen, she squinted and she goes, they made a show about this? She goes, he's so short. Like, what is this character? Whereas my gut reaction is like, when I think Peter Falk, I always just think of like old Peter Falk. So seeing this, like, he's kind of hot. Like, I wasn't expecting.
He looks so young, as long
Columbo.
as he doesn't look at you straight on, you know.
Right.
You should watch, if you watch the first pilot, which is called Prescription Murder, which is one of the names of one of the Mrs. Melville books in this episode is Prescription Murder
fun.
also.
Okay.
But the first pilot's called Prescription Murder. Peter Falk is like a smoke show.
And this is a very dumb question. It's not a thing.
It's a glass eye. He had cancer when he was a kid.
Okay, I was right. It wasn't like a Columbo character thing. It's not like a fake thing or something.
And there are even funny stories. He wrote about this once in his biography or autobiography, where he was like, someone once told him, "Why would I pay Peter Falk that salary for this role when I can get an actor with two good eyes for the same price?"
Okay. different world.
He really knows how to get the most out of it, though. I feel like he kind of does this thing where he's like moping around kind of, and then when he looks straight on at somebody, it's got the it's got a really strong effect.
Yeah. It's interesting. And honestly, it was probably a fun puzzle to try and shoot around for Steven Spielberg, who's directing this episode, right? Like, it's a fun idea of like, okay, when do we lean into that? When is the eye distracting? When is it good? It's always interesting.
Yes.
But that's like another huge takeaway from this episode, being a big Spielberg fan, is, boy, he's going for it. He wants
incredible.
people to notice that he's directing this.
He had it back then, didn't he? All right, because 71, that's 4 years before Jaws, which was like basically his first movie, right?
Well, it's like, Duel is the same year, 1971, and Duel rules, and like, it's crazy, like, oh, this is in that same era, he's cranking this out,
Yeah, it's so weird to think that like this was one of like Columbo is the show that he kind of cut his teeth on in some ways, you know.
Right, like he did like Night Gallery, like the Rod Serling show, a couple episodes of that before and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely, other than some of the, not that this is all fully on him, but I guess we can put it on him a little bit. Like some of the lighting in the office is a little rough. You can tell they're like shining the lights on the faces, and it's a little strong, a little all over the place and stuff. But like even that opening shot of just banging on the typewriter with the tracking shot, pulling into the building and stuff, or like the best shot is when the wife is talking to the cops and they're rummaging through the office and stuff.
Yeah, they're walking in front. It's like really chaotic feeling. And that one is awesome. I also want to shout out the wife's red and purple Magneto ensemble in that scene. It's fantastic. But the other one I love, the Spielberg thing, is the dissolve or the fade or whatever from the painting of Miss Melville to Franklin's face as he's driving the car.
Right.
There are some pretty brilliant fades or cuts from one scene to another in there. So we also had a lot of people, MinnMax supporters, go to patreon.com and leave their own comments about this.
Yeah.
And this is sort of jumping ahead a little bit on the plan, but I mean, we're talking about Spielberg now.
Please.
So we had Joe Mama write in and say, I was shocked by the flair and cinematography of this episode. I was not a Columbo fan. I'm about to be, though. So I wanted to know if this is par for the course or a little Spielberg magic. The camera work really sets a tone from start to finish.
Yeah.
And I think I am not, I mean, Ben, you actually pay way more attention to this kind of stuff with Spielberg than I do, but like, for me anyway, this seems like a higher bar than most Columbo episodes.
Really? You can notice
the cinematography. It feels to me, part of this, the one scene that really struck me was when they're out, this is way later in the episode, when after he's done the second murder and he's just out in the boat.
Yeah.
And there's some like the shots of the lake and the moonlight glistening.
And the music is very
stuff.
Twinkly and stuff.
To me, that was like, oh, this is cinematic. This isn't just cut a mystery movie scene and get it out the door.
Yeah, and Ben, you were mentioning like the cuts and stuff, and that was my absolute favorite cut of the episode when we go from Franklin smashing Lily with the champagne bottle to smash cut to him out in that boat. He's like, I said I was going to get a boat involved, and God dang it, I'm doing it.
Yeah, I love the long scream from her too. It's like, how big was that wind up? Was he really like giving a whirlwind ready to go with that bottle? But yeah, I think it's such an interesting thing to have. Now in retrospect, it's like, boy, what direction from Spielberg? What a genius. Whereas I'm sure a lot of TV directors, especially ones that are 20 years old, however old Spielberg was doing this, like, I'm sure a lot of them want to have their own style and be, for lack of a better term, obnoxious. Yeah. But it kind of gets ironed out like, all right, cool it, kid. Just shoot the freaking people talking. Yeah. And so somehow now, because Spielberg is brilliant, we look back at this and say, so well done. But if it was Herman Johnson directed this episode, I'd be like, what is this guy doing? Calm down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably true. Starkiller wrote in and sort of on a similar note about the cinematography. It says the extreme close-ups whenever people were really getting into each other, and the long take of Columbo making breakfast while cooking for the wife while also questioning her, was things that stood out on that.
Yeah.
And we didn't play it, so this isn't an official Deepest Dive.
Right.
When you do Deepest Dive, you do
most common
comment.
Yeah.
And
you're not going to reveal it, are you?
Oh, you want to guess it?
I didn't read. Yeah.
Okay, let's play it. Let's do the guess. What do you think is the most common comment?
Most common comment about Murder by the Book. I bet it's that guy sucked. The blonde guy. What a goober.
That's not it.
Dang it.
Did Lily, the grocery store owner who is the second murder victim, did Lily have fake teeth?
Oh, very interesting.
No.
Okay.
It wasn't. And I don't think she did. I don't think she did either. I looked up some pictures of the actress, Barbara Colby, I think.
Yeah.
And like in the other stuff she's in, I think that's just...
Yeah, who was murdered 5 years later and it's still unsolved. Yeah.
Are you
really?
serious?
The actress was, yeah.
And the actor who played Ken Franklin died just a few, if even a year.
5 years later as well.
Oh,
yes.
Also 5? Yeah.
What?
Jack Cassidy died he was like smoking in his apartment, and the cigarette like lit his Naugahyde couch on fire.
Yeah. Whoa. I would say mysterious circumstances as well. Maybe that's just because I look for that wherever I go. But Jack Cassidy, also father of teen idols Sean and David Cassidy
from the Partridge Family.
Yep. Oh, weird.
Yeah. Lots of connections like this in Columbo because they have so many like famous guest actors of the time.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think Peter Falk, I don't know, got a kick out is the wrong way to put it, but like when all these people that were in Columbo were murdered mysteriously, do you think he had a moment of like, That's my question.
Should I try to go solve it?
I guess that's the core of it. Yeah. Is it up to me now? What do we do with this? It's too relevant. It's weird.
I think that probably feels like work to him.
Yeah. So he's not a real detective. Is that what you're telling me?
So the most common comment.
Oh yeah.
Was far and away the omelet.
Oh, the weird omelet.
The omelet,
okay.
like the many facets of the omelet.
Smart.
From,
Yep, of course.
From the weirdness of cheese already being in the bowl to the outrageous amount of onion that was in there.
Yeah, it's like half an onion for an omelet.
Yeah. I wrote something down about that even. Bob Buell wrote in, I adored the scene where Colombo offers to make the victim's wife some food. All of his idiosyncrasies are on display, grabbing ingredients. Even his line where he mentions the secret to a good omelet, no eggs, all milk, where the script actually said no milk, all eggs.
Oh.
But and he's clearly got a ton of eggs.
Yeah.
Wait, so somebody looked up the actual script for the episode?
The actual script for the episode said no milk, just eggs.
Yeah.
But Peter Falk, either by mistake or intentionally to make Columbo seem a little like, goofy or scatterbrained, flipped it. You can't make an omelet with only milk and no eggs.
Can't make an omelet without cracking a few milks.
Yeah, you can't make an omelet without putting all the eggshells in a bowl.
Yeah, you need a bowl for that. Yeah,
but it's very clever. I'm sure they thought it was like, hey,
Joe, do you ever make Columbo omelets for Columbo's Day?
I might have to. If I were having an actual party this year, this year my Columbo's Day party has been remote. I mailed things out to people because of the everything. But I think if we were to watch this in person, I would probably have made a Columbo omelet.
Nice. I was like 50% chance when I roll up there, Joe is in Ben's kitchen.
Oh God, that'd be sweet. Oh, that would have been cool.
Okay. So user or community member Giorin says when Columbo's making the omelet, he puts a monstrous amount of onion. 1-to-1 ratio of onion to egg. There's no way that's tasting good.
But the whole thing, it's a metaphor because he's going around the kitchen gathering ingredients, which is what he's doing the whole episode. He's putting it all together, right?
Yeah.
Piece by piece, making mistakes.
And James Martin says Columbo's onion chopping is truly horrific. He did say he was a bad cook, but my God. And he put the butter into a cold pan and then half a second later puts the pan down and the sizzling loop begins and runs for the rest of the scene.
Perfect.
So,
I mean, he doesn't have any depth perception, so he's got to be real careful on that knife cutting.
That's interesting. Big swings there.
Yeah. And I also want to say on the subject of Columbo's Day proper.
Yeah.
On the day this is airing, October 11th, Columbus Day / Columbo's Day.
Officially Columbo's Day. National holiday.
James Ford says his birthday is October 11th.
Oh, Mr. Ford!
So happy birthday, James Ford. And he says, do I need to legally change my name to Columbo? Yes. And fortunately, yes.
It'd be nice. It'd really be nice.
I think
lucky you didn't ask that question like a couple years ago, or it would have had to been Columbus, which would be very problematic for James.
Yeah. But he's done it. People are watching us live at the Backstage Pass here on Patreon.
Yeah.
Kyle Silva says, I really thought we were going to see a real life Miss Melville, as if she was inspired by a real person. I just thought that was the direction the entire episode was going, is that like she was going to be this crucial component, but no, she's just a character in a painting, apparently.
That's great. And my other favorite thing about Mrs. Melville is about how Franklin is always like, oh, real life detective, if you were my fictional character.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I wrote to be omnipotent, you would have solved this already. It'd be like if like Arthur Conan Doyle went to Scotland Yard and we're like, well, Sherlock Holmes would have solved this one, guys.
Yeah. Okay, do it then, buddy. I'll sit back. You go ahead and do it.
So this is another funny thing about Columbo, just like as a series as a whole, is that the perpetrator very often is way too helpful.
He's always right there.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and part of that is that idea of like, if I'm here helping the detective solve the crime, helping in quotes, then I'm steering the detective away from relevant information and, trying to have him chase down red herrings like, oh, you really need to be looking into these mob bosses and stuff.
Call every guy in the mafia, Columbo.
Yeah, exactly. So, you can sort of do that, which of course, what I love about the dynamic of the show is that it's built so Peter Falk is just so like Columbo is so credulous in those situations. It's just like, oh yeah, okay, oh
Right,
yeah,
right.
I don't envy you, detective. Yeah, I don't envy myself. I'm really gonna have to dig into this. You know, he's like really playing along when you know in his head he knows what this person's doing.
Right.
He knew that guy was the killer right away.
And also, like, I like the extra layers of torture of just like going to his cabin and be like, I think I'm gonna get a cabin up here. How's the real estate? Just like really wasting this guy's time.
Oh, Ben.
Yeah.
So that is like, I think if you had me point out what the most Columbo thing in this episode is.
I'm talking about real estate?
Like, no, the most Columbo thing Columbo does in this episode, sort of looking at the series as a whole, is showing up uninvited at some like high society snob's private party or house or event or something with just a paper thin excuse for being there.
Perfect.
He does that all the time because it always gets a rise out of the killer. It is such an effective way for like to juxtapose the sort of like schlubby detective against the rich and famous people that he's always hunting. It's almost always someone rich and famous.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. There's never just, Columbo doesn't solve murders where, you know, some hot dog vendor kills another hot dog vendor.
Right.
It's always like a renowned art critic, a renowned, like, you know, TV star. It's always someone rich and famous.
I'm glad to hear you say that hot dog vendors are not killed because I want to go to Tail of the Dog and get a hot dog from there. That place looked amazing.
I also love, this is a dumb detail I noticed where he asks for a receipt.
Yes.
Presumably so he can expense this hot dog lunch that he later like submit a report. I spent $3 on hot dogs, please. Anyway.
The hot dog just sitting on the countertop, like no plates or anything. It's like, just go ahead and set it here where everyone's throwing their cash. That seems fine.
Yeah. So I want to get back to a few more comments because what we talked about before is like getting that setup where there is just a good chunk of time that Columbo isn't even there. And
that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is that like the default mode? Is it the main character is almost always the killer for these Columbo episodes? Because it really feels like Columbo is...
Yeah, Columbo almost always takes, at least 10 minutes, usually 15 to 20 before he shows up.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's Donnie writes in and says, the most confusing thing for me at first was how you're supposed to enjoy a mystery show when they give you all of the answers.
Right.
And the answer to that apparently is having the detective and the killer play cat and mouse, but they're both the cat and treating the other one as the mouse. As the mouse.
Interesting.
And that back and forth is so fun. When Columbo finally lays out how he's won, it's better than any episode of Law and Order.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, the cat and cat game.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I love that dynamic with Franklin where he's like, ooh, Columbo ended up with one really incisive question. Should I be concerned? No, he's a buffoon.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that gets into... actually, first, before we get into that, Sean Mills writes in and says, I really like the first 20 minutes of the episode, which don't feature Columbo at all. You get a good sense for the characters and their relationships pretty quickly, and the tension keeps escalating since you know a murder is going to be committed,
right?
But you don't know when or how.
It's not when he opens the door and there's a gun in his face, by the way.
That's my new favorite practical joke.
Like, it's really funny.
What if when you opened the door, I was holding a gun at you? What would your reaction
We would have laughed and laughed.
I don't think Ken Franklin understands what practical joke means, because there's that part later, too, where it's when the wife calls him and it's like, he's missing or killed or something, kidnapped. Oh, I'm sure it's just a practical joke.
Yes.
Hey, so this episode,
real quick.
Yeah.
Because there's a really interesting thing here where Sean Mills says, I thought the episode felt like a Phoenix Wright case with the murderer acting very sure of himself and slowly unwinding under Columbo's questions.
Yes.
Yep. And then the final courtroom scene in the office right at the end where Columbo lays it out. He gets way more aggressive than in my memory Columbo had ever been. And I liked it.
Yeah. And Columbo pretty much, only rare exceptions, usually only gets aggressive in that final confrontation. But what I love about the Ace Attorney call out there is that like the creator of Ace Attorney, Shu Takumi, said here in an interview with Game Informer, talking to Kimberly Wallace, said about Columbo that it was actually an inspiration for Phoenix Wright.
Okay.
So he says, I've been a big fan of the show since I was in elementary school, and there's even a scene or two in the games that were like inspired by Columbo. Like there are a couple scenes, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I think there's at least two that are like basically direct moments from Colombo translated into Phoenix Wright.
And then you've got Detective Gumshoe is basically like the bumbling detective without secretly being competent.
Yeah. So
is this episode like good for the overall frame of Colombo? That's what I was debating watching this. Is like, is this like the number one episode? Did you just pick this one because it's the first and Spielberg's interesting connection? Like, what number would you say? Top 5, top 10?
Boy, that's tricky. I would say this is a top 20 episode.
Okay, good way to know. Okay,
maybe top 15. But part of the reason why I think it's a good one is that I think it really illustrates well how from so early on, they knew what this formula was.
Yeah.
They knew what made this show work. They knew what made the character of Colombo like fun and interesting.
Right.
But then another thing about it, you know how, this is not the greatest analogy, but like, I think about, so I'm someone who has played and reviewed a lot of Assassin's Creed games.
Right.
And it's gotten to the point where there's so much that is, quote, Assassin's Creed, that it's impossible to make a single Assassin's Creed game that incorporates every element people associate it.
You got to have the tower defense.
Yeah, well, you joke, but I mean, it is stuff like that, right? Where like over time, there is so much about Colombo that has become identified and sort of iconic to it. But there's no one episode that is like the, quote, perfect episode that incorporates everything about the show that is good.
Really? But it seems formulaic. Like, it's the way you're setting this up made it seem like it's always just kind of this structure.
No, it always follows a similar structure, but I guess what I mean is like things about it that would be iconic would be like a brilliant murder and a great cat and cat game between Colombo and the killer,
right?
And some sort of funny emphasis on Colombo's car breaking down and being a piece of crap.
Loved it when he ran into that rock.
Yeah, and like Colombo's car is like a huge sort of non-character character.
Just like that's how they make his personality shine, where he's not going to talk with a lot of people other than the killer, but he'll just constantly be screaming at his car like a Millennium Falcon thing. Like,
no, he doesn't even talk to his car, but it's just it's very often like a point of, you know, it's also funny because it's this just really broken down Peugeot 403 is like his car.
Okay.
But then everyone else that like the killers always have fancy cars and stuff. So it always like stands in stark contrast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that car, like we're supposed to take away that it's a clunker in the modern, you know, time of Colombo, right?
Oh yeah. That is a clunker. Like at one point there's even a joke. I forget which episode it is, but someone is like someone's looking at Colombo's car and they're like, "Is this your car?" And with sort of disgust. And Colombo's like, "Yeah, my wife also has a car, but that's nothing special. That just gets her from point A to point B." Implying that this is the good car.
It's fun.
Nice.
And that detail about the wife, I remember, I think it's probably on a podcast you outlined that's your favorite thing about Colombo.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. It's like references to the wife or this huge expanded family that he apparently has.
Did you ever meet any of them?
Tangentially interested in various things. No, you don't meet, like, I think, okay, that's not totally true. I think we do meet his nephew. I think there's an episode where he like attends his nephew's wedding, if I'm remembering.
And it's like a Scrappy-Doo situation.
But you never see his wife. His wife is often mentioned, sometimes just barely off screen, like has just left or something. Well, because there's one episode where I think it's them, like they're on a cruise or something, and she's on the cruise with them, but she's just not in any scene.
That's funny. So it's a big joke, but like for the creators,
the wife thing is a.
But then it gets confusing because then they made a show about Colombo's wife.
Oh no! Well, okay, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
that's a tangent. It's basically the idea that they.
I like, Joe, you have to get yourself like
to explain Mrs. Colombo or whatever.
Okay, so Mrs. Colombo is a show that was made against the wishes of Colombo creators Levinson and Link, against the wishes of Peter Falk.
Yeah,
the network put the show together with Kate Mulgrew in the leading role.
Whoa.
Of Kate Colombo. And if you know Peter, like the age difference between the two of them, let's just say from Colombo's descriptions in the show, he is not married to a pretty young thing.
Right.
Kate
It's not his
Mulgrew.
Trophy wife. Yeah. Okay.
But in the intro to Mrs. Colombo, they heavily imply by showing Colombo's dog, who's named Dog, is another element that is sometimes in shows. And his like car in the driveway, they really imply like, yep, this is Colombo's wife. Until no one watched the show. it tanked. So then they kind of reworked the mythology of it. So it's a woman named Kate Colombo, but she's not married to iconic Detective Colombo anymore.
But same universe?
Or multiverse. That's what I was going for too.
And then who even knows? And then no one watched that. So then they changed the name of the show again to Kate Loves a Mystery. Just eliminating that Colombo connection.
And apparently
entirely.
no viewers do.
No, and it's like 3 name changes to the show in the like season and a half it ran or whatever.
God.
It's just an S show. So
Wow.
yeah. Anyhow, so that's the Mrs. Colombo story.
Love it. Okay.
But all of this coming back to the original point is like there are all of these little elements about it. Oh, or like a fantastic gotcha at the end is another thing.
Right.
So all of those things, you maybe turn up the lever on one of them in one episode, but that means the lever on the other one goes down a little bit. So like I think for this episode in particular, you have like a really clever crime, a pretty dynamic villain that Jack Cassidy plays.
Yeah.
I think one of the areas that it costs in that sense is in that final gotcha. I don't think it's the best. It's not the best, like the noose tightening moment.
Right. I want to see somebody undoing their tie Matlock style. Like, oh, what? Yeah.
The best one of those is one called Suitable for Framing.
Okay.
Like if you want to see the suspect getting like, what? No.
Right.
That's that one.
Okay. Do you have a number one go-to episode, number one episode of Columbo ever?
Boy, yeah, I think my personal favorite one is called. Actually, I wrote it down. Hold on. Like I said, I'm not super great with all the names. It's called A Stitch in Crime.
A Stitch in Crime,
and that's got it stars Leonard Nimoy as a heart surgeon, and I think that episode has everything I want in terms of like a super clever crime.
Yeah,
just. Nimoy is so wonderful as a villain in that episode because he's so like cold.
Yeah.
He definitely has his like, his Galvatron. No, that's not the right way to say it because Galvatron's sort of unhinged. But, like he definitely just exudes evil while still being like a very realistic professional kind of evil.
Right.
I do like that you went straight for the Transformers, the movie reference. Yeah. Love it.
But it also has, again, a great moment of Columbo breaking into his party and eating a bunch of his food. And Columbo eats his food so fast that he gets indigestion and needs to like take some heartburn medicine in his bathroom.
This is good.
What era is this from? Because Columbo ran from like 71 to what? Like the year 2000, basically, right?
Until 2003. It's sort of Columbo really, though, it's split into 2 distinct eras. And effectively, there are, I can't remember how many seasons it is exactly. Is it 7, maybe? The season distinction stops being really important, but it's basically like there's an original run of Columbo.
Yeah.
That I believe was on NBC, and then it moved to ABC like 10 or 15 years later.
Jeez.
They started it up again, and that was a lot more in the sort of just like periodic movies and not really in like that season format.
Yeah, I think like did Gunsmoke do something similar where it's like they still had like technically new episodes of Gunsmoke in like 1997 or something. I was like, what the hell? Because they would just bring it back for like these events.
But if you're watching, I would say to anyone who's interested in like watching more Columbo, do not watch those later era ones.
Oh, really?
Like they're like there are some of them that are interesting. They're curiosities and like they're fun for people like me who are really into the show.
Yeah.
But like they do not age well, I think is the big problem. I think when you're watching something from the 60s and 70s, there's a kind of like classic noir cool kind of thing going on with it.
Right.
But then you start getting into the ones that are like, oh, here's a Columbo episode where it's like it's about video games, kind of like the Murder, She Wrote VR episode, right? Where you're just like,
both these things sound very good.
Like
it's a bad thing. What does Columbo say about video games? This sounds great.
Oh, like the killer is a video game programmer.
That's kind of fun.
So, well, no, but I mean, it's like
everybody watching this will want to watch that episode. You realize what you've done.
The Murder, She Wrote one about VR is fantastic, and Jessica Fletcher solves the murder by like figuring out the VR adventure game that she is playing. It's incredible.
Yeah. Anyway.
Hey, how did you get into Colombo though?
I watched it with my parents when I was growing up. So
okay.
but that means I was watching the bad ones, like the ones that were airing in like the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Those were the ones that I saw. But then one year for Christmas, because I knew my parents liked the show, I gave them just a DVD of like, here's the first season of Columbo. I know you like it. And they watched it and they're like, you want to borrow this? It's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, oh my God, I unironically think this is maybe the best television show.
I love Columbo.
Wait a minute, I'll take this.
And then at that time, it wasn't streaming anywhere or anything. This was, again, like this was probably around 2009, 2010 or so that this was happening. So it was like, it's not like there was some robust Netflix like selection for old TV shows at the time. So I remember having to get like subscribing to the disc-based Netflix program again.
Right.
After I think I'd already unsubscribed from it, just so I could like keep watching Columbo.
Oh boy.
And now I have the box set, but
yeah.
Anyway, so that's how I got into it.
We got into it because some weirdo said we need to watch Murder by the Book.
I will say when I finished that episode, I was like, I'm going to be watching a lot of these.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yes.
Oh man. Well, yeah. So it's. I think one thing. This is gonna jump ahead a little bit, but one of the questions that we had was from
Columbo.
No, but it was from MinnMax's own Jason Daphnis.
Oh yeah.
And he says, "Why do you think so many people started watching Columbo during the pandemic?"
Really? So it actually is a weird trend?
Yeah, I just saw Murder by the Book at a secret screening at the Trilon in Minneapolis.
What?
And the directed by Steven Spielberg got a legitimate gasp from everyone in the audience.
That's hilarious.
What a crazy, unpredictable thing that makes so much sense in hindsight. And I think that's really true. Is that I've definitely noticed a huge uptick in like general Columbo interest on social media.
Wow.
And I think it has a lot to do with. Well, I guess, I don't know. I have my opinion. What do you guys think?
I genuinely have no idea. I've seen, it honestly is just, I've seen Gary Whitta tweet about Mark Ruffalo should be Columbo.
Yeah.
He seemed to be tweeting that 4 times a day.
Because I think Murder, She Wrote has experienced sort of a similar boost,
similar
right?
renaissance. Yeah. And, I think there's something comforting about watching a one and done episodic show where something bad happens and then your hero saves the day at the end.
Yeah. I guess people, I don't understand it. I've never been one of these people, but I know a lot of people who's like, oh, of course I've seen every episode of Law and Order. Like, of course I've just never stopped watching that show. And it's like, what are you talking about? So maybe everyone's just worked through every other kind of crime show throughout the pandemic. And it's like, what else we got?
Particularly with these shows like Columbo and Murder, She Wrote, there's like the nostalgic appeal, not just that you might have watched it with your parents, but like, what does the world look like that these people inhabit? It's really interesting, like how... Like in this one, I was like, why did she call the operator to connect to the police? Because 911 wasn't implemented until 1972 in California.
Interesting. Yeah, there's other weird timestamps too. Like at one point, Columbo's like, the Daily Double. I was like, that's a Jeopardy thing. It was Jeopardy around in 1971. Yeah, it turns out it was, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Probably not Alex Trebek, though.
No, I wouldn't imagine so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, for me anyway, I think Ross hits the nail on the head, but there's something especially... about Murder, She Wrote and Columbo both, I think, that I don't know if cozy is exactly the right word. I think it's the right word for Murder, She Wrote. Maybe not totally Columbo, but when people think of like cozy mysteries and stuff, I think there's an element of this that is, that the good character is just inherently good.
Right.
Like you're dealing with a virtuous character. There's not going to be any last minute, shocking betrayal. Columbo's not going to like become a dirty cop at some point.
Right.
And the murders, as like deviously devised as they are not going to be gory. There's not going to be human suffering in them.
Right.
And there aren't going to be a lot of like depictions of like abuse or rape or anything like that. It's just like straightforward,
good old-fashioned bottle murder.
Straightforward, bloodless killing.
Yep. Even though he did have that couch wrapped up in plastic.
It's pretty gross. Yeah, it's implied he knows exactly. How
warning sign number one when you go to somebody's cabin and they've got a couch in plastic or they've got an invisible net that traps you while you're walking there.
Oh wow, deep cut from this episode of the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess for me, like that's what I think part of it is a time when people were really sort of into comfort viewing for their entertainment. I think that there's just something inherently comfortable about something that is like pure-hearted, formulaic, and not like disturbing.
Right. So Murder by the Book.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I was paying attention the entire time, but I was still a little confused by the end of it about like, what's his goal exactly? Because at some point Columbo asks him like, by the way, if a partner disappears, what happens to the rights of the book? It's like, oh, it reverts to the spouse. Yeah. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, they're going to reveal that he's also having an affair with her, and then that's how he would get all the rights. But it wasn't that. So he just, what was the goal here?
It was that he took out an insurance policy, or they had taken out insurance policies on each other, the writing partners, right? Yeah. And he was going to collect on that. That's what that scene at the hot dog stand was. He was getting a copy of that.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, which, again... One of the reasons why I think the gotcha is a little weak is that it's not, there's no reason to obscure that fact, right? When Columbo asks insurance guy over hot dogs, there's a policy I need to know about.
Right.
They should have just given the viewer that information. But,
right.
But yeah, that's what it was, is the money for that.
And I guess like the big reveal at the end of the episode was that idea that it was his original creation for the concept of this murder, where it is a fun setup of being like, yeah, you couldn't even come up with this murder. But it's like, oh no, I told him that, and then he wrote it down for some reason and put it in this drawer.
It's my one good idea.
Yeah. Right, this hack.
So I watched this episode a couple times, and I didn't notice this on my first watch through, but on the second time, when they're driving up to the cabin, Jack and Jim, or Ken and Jim, Jim says something about like, this feels a little like deja vu.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, of course.
And it's a total throwaway line in the moment that they don't follow up on immediately, and you have no idea. And I didn't catch it until the second time through. It's like, oh, he's heard this setup before. This is a pitch for a murder mystery that he is reenacting, but he doesn't totally remember.
Yeah.
So I want to hit up a couple more comments here from the community, sort of focusing on Columbo. Just Columbo as a character.
Columbo writ large.
Yeah. Because I think it's super interesting. Abigail Warner says, it's such a groundbreaking series for showing you exactly how the murder happens, and then you get to watch the murderers unravel as they get cocky because Columbo plays it off as if he's just a bumbling detective who needs their help. And then...
Oh, by the way, so James Martin says that apparently there's a British show called Mrs. Maple. Not Miss Melville, but Mrs. Maple, that's also structured the same way of revealing the murder.
Okay. And then MJ Wright has a comment here too. That's, how much is Columbo purposefully forgetful and bumbling versus just like that?
Yeah, is it like Usual Suspects thing? Like when he's walking home on his own, is he just like slowly straightening up and just being fully confident?
And I don't know. I like thinking about this. I don't know. Like, what's your take?
I mean, you probably know because there's been episodes where he's by himself, but I think there's a little bit of an act, right?
Yeah, I think he's definitely playing up like his natural tendencies, but I think when we see him in that last scene, he's so with it, he's so together, he's not bumbling around anything, he's just nailing Franklin to the wall, and I like that. He's got both of those sides.
I'll have to see how he interacts with his nephew, I think, to get like the clean read on who is this guy actually.
Because I mean, my take on that is that he is by nature, I think, a little scatterbrained. I think a little bumbling, a little schlubby. Like when he's looking for something and he pulls a boiled egg out of his coat pocket.
Right.
Like that's not some act. He has a boiled egg in his coat pocket that he was supposed to eat for breakfast that he forgot about. You know, it's
Joe, do you have one in that coat right there?
Please tell us you do.
Pull it out right now.
Columbo's Day prop. So I think that there's an element that of him just being like that.
Right.
But I think he also recognizes that him being like that is a huge asset when you're trying to sort of knock off balance these sort of very cool, collected, famous killers.
Right.
So
right.
I think it's less of an act and him more just kind of leaning into himself a little bit and letting that stuff happen, because I think he knows that the more questions he asks and the more he prompts the other person to say something, the more valuable information he's going to get, not necessarily even by the exact words they're saying, but like by what they omit, by what their mannerisms are, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Is there a better word connection to a human being than Colombo and schlubby? Like he is just the personification of the word schlubby, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. User Ryan says, it might just be me, but are Columbo's methods and questioning tactics anime AF?
Oh, interesting.
Maybe it's in the way he points out seemingly innocuous details, and then they end up being significant in the resolution. But because Columbo predates modern anime, it would be more accurate to say anime is Columbo AF.
Those are very wise words.
Yeah. But
I mean, that's just the Ace Attorney thing, right?
Yeah, it is. Well, and there's a funny video out there. I'd recommend you it was doing the rounds earlier this year. Do a search on YouTube for if Columbo were anime.
Ooh.
And it's just a funny little 10-second exchange.
Yeah.
That someone animated with a villain that is clearly inspired by Ken Franklin. From this episode.
Ooh,
yeah.
okay,
yeah.
good.
But it's like, hey, Mr. Hashimoto-san, this is a nice place. There's just one more thing. And, kind of anime affectations and stuff.
But did he said at some point he said one thing, but he didn't do the full just one more thing in this episode.
No, and that's one of the interesting things about it is I don't know that he ever actually says specifically, there is just one more
really?
thing.
Wow.
It's like the play it again, Sam thing?
Yeah.
Where it's not actually in there?
Yeah, it's sort of, that quote is sort of an amalgamation of any number of...
Oh, interesting.
There is one thing. Or, sorry, one more question I was hoping you could clear up. A lot of little things. So it's there is always one more thing, but he doesn't always say catchphrase like, one more thing.
Oh, okay. I was fully waiting for that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's that. I think I don't know. Did you guys get, Clemens Zobel says, I'm still on the fence about Columbo as a character. By the end of the episode, I was starting to see what one might like about him, but early on I was getting weird vibes. The first scene between him and the wife came off as a little creepy.
It did, where he's like, no, you should go home and I'll come too, She's like this weird man who's just saying he's a detective kind of.
Yeah.
It plays a little bit differently in this day and age,
well,
for sure.
Especially it's her wife her husband was just murdered, and it's you got to give her a little bit of space here, Columbo.
Yeah. Well, and she says she doesn't want an omelet.
Right.
But you just keep banging around her kitchen, insisting on making her an omelet, asking her for her skillet and bowl and eggs and cheese. And yeah.
I guess I wasn't too creeped out.
Yeah. I will say part of what's funny to me is that that scene with the omelet is not that is not a typical Columbo scene.
Okay.
Of him going to someone's house and cooking for them.
It's not a staple? Okay, interesting.
That's not a usual thing, but I think it's also interesting because for an early show in the series, for an early episode, it does establish him as a much more empathetic character. All these cops in the other room are peppering her with questions, asking her the same question multiple times. She's clearly distressed. Yeah. And I think it speaks a lot to Columbo as a character to just be hey, let's get out of here, and this isn't any good for you.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you this. Does he do the thing in other episodes a lot where he goes to the spouse of the victim and says, here's who I think did it. And I need your help to set a trap.
So this is no.
Okay.
No. And that's another thing about this episode, I think anyway, is that it's a little atypical that he tips his hand as much as he does.
Right.
Yeah. The thing about hey, that's your mail. What's your mail doing there? Or, I called last night to let you know I was coming and no one was home.
Okay. So normally those should be little surprises of okay, he did notice that at the end.
Yeah. So I feel like Columbo sort of I think it's for the sake of the audience to be like, look, don't worry about me, everyone. I know what's really going on here.
Right, right.
But I think that ends up him giving the killer maybe a little more of a heads up about where he's at than usual.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, yeah. The other key component to any Columbo episode is the killer, right? Like the person that they play off of. And I thought that we had some good comments about that here too. Mike Lynch says the actor playing Ken Franklin, who's Jack Cassidy, is a real pro. When he's opening the champagne bottle in the first scene, the cork pops out on its own and he doesn't skip a beat. He laughs it off and continues with his dialogue. So when he is
really,
when he's like, hey, a toast to, our divorce or something, right? Mm-hmm. When he opens that champagne bottle, he doesn't do anything to it. He opens it and the cork just pops.
Oh wow!
And he doesn't skip a beat. He's like, and there you go. And the tape just continues.
Did you ever watch the Double Fine Adventure documentary series?
I know what you think about it. Yeah,
it's the best thing ever. But they're celebrating when Broken Age hit its funding goal on Kickstarter, and Ron Gilbert, a legendary adventure game designer, he's trying to get the cork out of this bottle of champagne and he can't do it. And so he has it in his mouth. He's like, like gnawing on it and it won't go. And then he takes it out of his mouth and then boosh, it shoots off like a second later and they have it on tape. And so I think they even do like a replay of it. Like we were about to see Ron Gilbert just like choke to death on a cork bottle during the celebration. It's crazy.
Oh my.
It would have been fun.
Okay. Well, I'll have to look that up.
Like what would that happen? What would happen to your body, you think, if you just shot a cork directly into your throat? Would you...
I don't know that it would go down there.
It feels like a perfect shot. Nothing but net.
You might lose some teeth.
Yeah, maybe it would like ricochet around. Bung, 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 bung.
Oh. Somebody might have to get the corkscrew to get it out of.
And then your lungs pop out like it. Oh,
the perfect murder.
Gross. Kyle Silva says, he points out how funny it is that he calls that a practical joke that your husband is missing.
Of course.
But also says, according to Wikipedia, Jack Cassidy has played 3 different culprits throughout the Columbo series, including Murder by the Book. Robert Culp has also been in 3.
So they just recycle it? Like, it's basically Albert Brooks in The Simpsons. Just, here's a new character.
That happens a lot in Murder, She Wrote, too.
Really?
Like, the guy from Twin Peaks is like 5 different killers in the show.
Oh,
it says, I've heard of the concept of recycling actors before, but do you find this strange? Is it fair to say Columbo is a lot like The Simpsons, where some episodes contradict the existence of others?
Yes.
And there's the number one... So Jack Cassidy and Robert Culp are tied for number 2 in terms of Columbo killers. A guy named Patrick McGowan played 4 Columbo killers.
Wow. And with only, 69, 70 episodes, that's a fair percentage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird.
So anyway, so I think it's cool, especially when you don't see it as much with Jack Cassidy, but it's clear that Peter Falk and Robert Culp are like, those guys are buddies.
Right,
yeah,
right.
They must be.
And it shows. There's just something in the dynamic that
is Peter Falk. This is naive. Is he famous for other films or TV shows or roles? Like, what's his number one movie?
I mean, Columbo's the big thing. I think his. I mean, he's done lots of other movies. I mean, like Jason Daphnis said, the Trilon recently had like a Peter Falk movie festival where they showed like 4 of them on it, but. I think probably his other biggest well-known movie is The Princess Bride.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I forgot about it. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
he was like the narrating grandpa. But I mean, Columbo is Peter Falk's thing. That's what he is famous for.
Okay.
Yeah. Chandler Miller says, I thought the episode overall was just okay. Columbo's a fun character to watch, but I thought the murderer was pretty dull.
What?
Agree to disagree. There wasn't a satisfying big reveal when he solved the case. Okay, yeah. And all the evidence suggests the murder, but doesn't prove it. And I don't think this guy is going to jail.
Interesting. I mean, I guess there's nothing very... I mean, he kind of gives it up himself by the end.
Yeah,
so
that's the key part of any mystery show resolution is you got to get that person to confess. Otherwise, it's not going to stick.
Yeah.
Which... he does. Jack Cassidy or Ken Franklin is like, I had you going for a while.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like he does do the confession.
Yeah, he eventually gets him.
I want to point people towards a website out there called the Columbo File Phile, Columbo file. Just a huge, great resource for Columbo-related stuff. This is a guy who has, I've talked with him a little bit. This is a guy who's like sort of what the main thing he does is like, just like maintain this site. And I mean, he maybe has another job, but this is like the largest focus of his free time is,
oh my God,
like this site. But,
and his name is Joe?
But the thing on this site, there's a guest post from someone named Richard Weil, who is a professional like prosecutor. And he breaks down sort of the first 12 Columbo episodes, like what happens when these cases go to court.
Oh, that's very fun.
So just on that point, I thought that was that's a fun thing to check out to see.
Yeah. Do you remember what he said about this one? Do you remember if he thought that it was doable?
I wrote it down. He says, how does the prosecutor prove that the actual murder was committed practically word for word, as Ferris notes described? You know, A wants to kill B, B drives to a remote house and hasn't called his wife in the city, tell her he's working late, bang, bang. Like, where's the proof that Franklin wanted to kill Ferris? What's the proof that Franklin drove Ferris to a remote house? Or that Ferris called his wife to tell her he was working late at Franklin's suggestion? To me, that's the problem with proving Columbo's theory in court. To prove the theory, you need to prove that Franklin murdered Ferris. And if you can do that, why do you need to prove the theory at all? Because you have proof of the murder.
Interesting.
So, anyway, so I thought that was, I'd recommend that if you
Oh, that's perfect.
If you like that stuff.
Love it.
Also. Other fun comments from the community. Another one about Mrs. Lasanka.
We haven't really dove into her enough. Yeah.
Christopher Reardon writes, Peter Falk put on a stunning performance, but I think my favorite character was Lily Lasanka, the country store owner. The scene at the bar where she's trying to tell Franklin what she knows without actually saying it was a delightful scene, and that silent scream before Franklin kills her is chef's kiss.
Yeah, this is the thing that this is maybe naive to even try and figure out, but like, yeah, how much of it is she's just super fan versus wants the money? It seems like, okay, clearly super fan. Then at a certain point, it's like, oh no, is she shrewd and just wants the money? Okay, now it's shifting back to super fan. Like, is it just a weird mix?
It's a little column A, little column B.
So.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, this is one of the things I think this is so smart, because for the first episode, or the first real episode in this show's run, it would be so easy if you have a blackmail like side plot to just be like, look, this is just a malicious blackmail. I know what you did.
Right.
And to put this spin on it, I think is so clever and gives this actress a place to shine, gives the sort of like despicable nature of Ken Franklin another spotlight of like, the way he acts with her. Yeah. Because I think her actions, I think, are contradictory, but she doesn't necessarily realize that, right? Like she wants this doomed romance to work. Yes. She wants this money. She doesn't want Ken Franklin to go to jail. She wants to be compensated for supporting him. But in the process of blackmailing him, she also wants to date him.
Right.
Genuinely.
Yep. Right.
I was just like writing a note while watching the episode. Oh, I'm glad that they made her smart enough not to fall for the obvious boat murder ploy.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah.
She's like, but she ends up being like, well, as long as I don't get in a boat with this guy, I'm going to be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, imagine she must be kind of playing the long game, right? Thinking like, okay, if I can just avoid being murdered by him for long enough, he's going to grow to love me.
Yeah.
It's kind of her attitude.
Everybody's dating theory.
Her nervous energy is just fantastic. And like that scene where the first blackmail scene where they're having dinner and she's eating the strawberries, and it's like
In
Return
ice
of the
is-
King, sort of, with the weird strawberry eat. Yeah.
Right.
Joseph Dowdy writes in and says, this was my first experience with Columbo, and boy, were my eyes glued to the screen.
Wow.
Yes.
Hey, you did it.
After Mrs. Lasanka asked for $15,000 for her silence, I did a quick Google search and found that $15,000 in 1971 has the approximate buying power of $100,000 today.
All right.
So,
yeah,
good thing.
Checks out.
Yeah. And Robert Cassidy says, Mrs. Ferris is surprisingly calm and casual throughout the whole episode, considering what happened to her husband.
That is very true. She's the real culprit here, the suspect. I don't know what's going on.
Cold-hearted.
Yeah. So that's sort of the comments on the supporting cast.
Of course, somebody named Cassidy is going to try to throw off suspicion from the true killer here.
That's right.
So this sort of hits on something we talked about earlier, but Dan writes in and says, how well do you think Colombo would resonate with today's generation? Thinking largely of the technology gaps, right?
Yeah.
I'm on display here briefly with the discussion about long-distance phone calls. My favorite episode, Negative Reaction, starring Dick Van Dyke, deals with cameras and film.
Oh, that sounds good.
And the climax in that case may not make much sense to younger viewers who've never used anything but a digital camera. So bottom line, do you think if you watch this with a teenager, you'd hear "Okay, Boomer" a lot?
No, I don't think so. It's not trying to be cool. Like, I just feel like people can understand this.
Yeah, as long as you were to explain to your child what a landline is,
right,
and why people can't see where people are calling from, et cetera, et cetera. There's like technological questions like that, but other than that, like you said, it's not, it's not trying to be something that it's not. So it's as long as they can handle that stuff and the pace of it, which is a little more slow than a lot of stuff these days. I think it has like a baseline quality.
Yeah. Plus, I think like with a generational thing, I think it's always tempting to be like, oh, kids are so confused. They don't understand what I went through. It's like, they're fine. They get the basic beats of all this stuff. It's a certain level of narcissism to be like, I bet you don't understand how phones used to work. It's like, not the specifics, but I get the idea, old man.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and they act as though like tons of it's not like teenagers are watching Downton Abbey. Well, I don't know if they are watching Downton Abbey. But it's like you don't watch a period. I mean, I don't watch Downton Abbey, and I'm like, what horses? Where are all the cars? There should be so many more cars.
Why does that car have legs?
Yeah, So I think don't underestimate what people can pick up from context. Right. I think the point though about that Dick Van Dyke episode in particular, it does rely very heavily on like negatives and mirrored images and things like that to a degree that would but I don't think the show takes that knowledge for granted. Right. I think that even at the time, the people who are watching this show aren't experts in photography, aren't experts in computers when computer episodes show up. So they kind of just have to provide enough foundational information to make sense to a then modern viewer that translates pretty well to a today modern viewer.
By the way, if you're listening to this on Patreon, which by the way, if you support us on Patreon, you're like the podcast version of a lot of these shows. But also if you're watching this on YouTube, wherever you're consuming this, leave a comment. I want to know the youngest person watching this far in. Because, my God, I feel like you're probably aging. It's just like the end of The Last Crusade as you're watching an hour-long discussion on Columbo. What do you think? Is there a 22-year-old watching this?
Yes.
No. But prove me wrong.
I was going to say, but he or she is related to Joe.
Oh, interesting.
There we
it's
go.
Joe's nephew. Yeah.
Possibly.
Okay. Yeah. Let us know, please, in the comments.
Ryan Besadny says, has TV crime moved from one-star shows like Columbo, Murder, She Wrote, Matlock, Perry Mason, to ensemble casts, CSI, Bones, Psych, Criminal Minds. And so sort of like, what do you think about the idea of like lone wolf mysteries versus...
Well, I wonder if like the equivalent now is something like House even, right? And not that that's the most current thing, but it's like a different thing, but kind of still a mystery that he's just the genius at.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, I think the thing behind a lone wolf kind of story is it really does let you like dive in to one character, that character's personality, and it feels like you get to know them better, and that character, to me anyway. So like the only comparison point I have is really Criminal Minds from a modern perspective. Sure. That's the only one of those shows that I've seen. I've seen maybe 20 episodes of it. Yeah, and it's like that. The characters in that show don't feel like an ensemble to me. They don't feel like genuine. It feels like a sort of like a demographic spread, sort of cynically designed to have a character to appeal to every kind of viewer, to rope as many people into it.
I guess so.
Whereas something like Columbo is sort of like, hey, if you don't dig Columbo, then this isn't the show for you.
Right. I'm curious like how the reception was for that Perry Mason reboot. Like James Martin in the chat said that he's wondering if Columbo could make a comeback. Like I wonder if just like that lone crime solver would land.
Yeah, that becomes more of an ensemble too in the reboot too. Yeah, my wife and I just finished watching that, and
I haven't seen that yet, but I want to.
It's great, but it is not like the old Perry Mason. It's more of a serialized type story following a single case.
I heard it was pretty dark. Also.
It is extremely dark. So yeah, be careful about that. But it is, and it's also like an origin story. How did Perry become the lawyer that you knew and loved from 60 years ago or whatever?
Right.
And yeah, so it's like really good, but it is definitely modernized in a way that is, that makes it not what it was when the original show was airing.
Okay.
Ooh, also, update for us. Kyle Silva, watching us at the Backstage Pass, who also wrote in there.
Yeah.
He's 23. That's pretty good. That's pretty good, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle.
Very impressive.
Yeah. So I didn't get a chance to get to every comment that people wrote in. Obviously, Ben, I have no idea how you manage all of this stuff for Deepest Dive all of the time. I have a newfound respect for that.
Oh, that's very nice.
That you can bet when the Metroid Dread Deepest Dive starts up next week, I'm going to be, newly appreciative.
Oh, thank you. Well, it helps there because I have Control F for keywords, so I don't have to rummage through paperwork, so it's a little bit easier.
But I had one more that I wanted to end on from Preetham Yarlagadda, who says, if I wanted to branch out from here, what would you recommend?
Yes.
Like, should I watch Columbo chronologically? Are there specific seasons that stand out? Are there different eras? More Columbo context. So, like I said, skip. You can come around to them later, but if you want to watch more of this right now, skip that sort of skip that revival.
Except for the video game one. You should watch that next. And then dive into the good ones.
But my favorite ones, like I talked about already, A Stitch in Crime with Leonard Nimoy is a great one. Also previously mentioned Negative Reaction with Dick Van Dyke, the camera one.
Yeah.
I think what makes both of those episodes that I like so much, I think what makes them so good is they have almost that perfect balance of like a little bit of everything that you love about Columbo being good to great.
Yeah.
Sort of that, like, for me, the Assassin's Creed Syndicate of, I love the assassinations and those are great in here. And I love the climbing and I really like the way they handled that in here. And blah, 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 blah. Right.
Yeah,
so it's like all of those little elements. I think those two episodes are, I think, probably the two like most perfect examples of the Columbo formula.
And where's the best place to watch them?
Peacock, which you have if you have a
Comcast,
like cable TV subscription.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Peacock has the whole Columbo series.
Interesting.
I'm not sure. I know at least the first season of the show is on Amazon.
Right.
But I don't know if the whole thing is on Amazon.
Okay.
Also, just honestly, there are some episodes that if you just like search for Negative Reaction full episode, I don't think it's totally legal, but you can find places online that have it. The other one that I want to steer people towards.
Yeah.
Because, so the Columbo formula is the noose tightening, and at the end you get that sort of profound sense of justice being done as the evil, maniacal killer sort of gets what's coming to them. Mm-hmm. There are a few sort of weird exceptions to that formula, and the one that works the best is one called Swan Song with Johnny Cash.
What?
And what makes that episode so interesting, and why I'd recommend it if you like the show but want something a little more offbeat, is because they make Johnny Cash a sympathetic killer. So
interesting.
The people,
because they're like, nobody's gonna hate Johnny Cash.
Yeah, it's impossible.
No. So like the premise is he's a singer. Surprise, surprise. And basically his wife and mother belong to some sort of weird religious organization that I think is meant to be the LDS Church, but they don't say it directly.
Okay.
But they're taking all of his money and they're basically not letting him have all of his money is just going to the church.
Gotcha.
So he kills them, and then but the guilt of it like really brings him down. And he's sort of like he's still trying to like fend Columbo off, but in a way that it's just like, you just feel bad for him. You feel like he was justified in the murder to some way.
That's interesting. That's a really fun premise.
So then in the final like gotcha moment it's not this thing where Colombo gets him and he's like, he just has this sense of relief. And there's this moment of like cool mutual respect between Colombo and the killer that is like, he's basically just like appreciative for Colombo finally just ending this charade and having it. So anyway.
That's good. That's
Swan
good.
Song is another good one.
Joe, I know you think that we're done with community questions, but we're not really.
What?
Because we had several people write in with Colombo-themed questions for the MinnMax Show podcast this week, and we didn't get to it. Because believe it or not, Jenna Garcia and Sarah Pazorski did not care about Colombo.
They didn't want to talk about Colombo. Okay.
Yeah. But Shane C. writes in.
Yeah.
Says, in honor of Joe Juba and MinnMax's upcoming Colombo's Day celebration, I've created a game I like to call Colombo Episode or Red Dead Redemption 2 Mission.
Oh, boy. Like I said, I'm so bad with the trivia here. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
I'll do my best.
Joe, dead weight. Colombo or Red Dead?
Red Dead.
It's Colombo.
Dang it.
Requiem for a Falling Star.
Oh, that one's Colombo.
Correct. A Short Walk in a Pretty Town.
That's Red Dead.
Correct. Any Old Port in a Storm.
Colombo.
Correct. Hell Hath No Fury.
Red Dead.
Yes. Goodbye, Dear Friend.
Red Dead.
Yes. By Dawn's Early Light.
Colombo.
Wow. A Matter of Honor.
Colombo.
Yes. The Fine Art of Conversation.
Red Dead.
Yes. The Course of True Love.
Red Dead.
Correct. But we're not done, because Bob Buell also wrote in saying, hey, everybody, it's time to play America's fastest growing quiz show sensation, Colombo episode or L.A. Noire case.
Oh, no.
All right. Hang on. Hands of the Colombo episodes have 2 stars. Okay. A Stitch in Time or Buyer Beware. Which is Colombo? What are you doing?
Stitch.
Oh, Stitch in Crime.
Oh, Stitch in Crime.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. You're overthinking it. You're right. Okay. Okay. Which is Colombo? An Exercise in Fatality or the Red Lipstick Murders?
Exercise in Fatalities. Colombo.
Correct. A Marriage Made in Heaven or Lovely but Lethal?
Lovely but Lethal.
Correct. A Deadly State of Mind or Armed and Dangerous?
Deadly State of Mind.
Yes. The White Shoe Slaying or Dead Weight?
Dead Weight.
Wow. Yes. A Polite Invitation.
I just got the dead weight answer from
That's
the last
true.
one.
A Polite Invitation or Double Exposure?
Double Exposure.
There we go, everybody. Joe Juba, champion.
Incredible.
Colombo champion. You can't stump this guy.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
That's the community question.
Those are the community questions.
I was really nervous about that because, like I said, the trivia stuff, like.
Oh yeah. You
I'm not great.
wowed them all.
Yeah, if you didn't get it right, people might have stopped watching, right?
Yeah, just imagine the horror.
Well, before we close it off here.
Hang on, stop.
What?
I mean, you're really going to transition with that before we close it off here?
Well, I want to give you something.
Yeah. So.
Is there a different phrase you could use?
Right. Okay. So before we close it off here, there is just one more thing I was hoping you could help me out with.
He did it. He did the thing.
I have one more thing, and that is I have little gifts for you guys. I'm sorry for the audio listeners.
He's rummaging through a bag.
I'm rummaging through a bag, but
seems
so
good.
Part of Colombo's Day every year is I make buttons for attendees. So this is a Jack Cassidy button.
Oh man, I love it.
Thank you so much.
What a piece of work.
Says it's hard to read, but it says the Daily Double. Colombo's Day 2021.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's amazing. Oh, this guy sucks so bad.
And
what?
For each of you, I made up these little journals that say that they're sort of reproductions of the prescription murder book.
What?
Wow.
With a bookmark for you.
That's absurd.
He even signed it.
Love always.
To Ben, love always, Joe. That's incredible. And he wrote the entire book, everybody. Amazing dedication. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Wow. All I got you was a table to spill on.
Yeah,
so
well, thanks.
I guess to each their own. Thank you to everybody in the community for watching an episode from 1971 and for submitting a comment. We're very impressed. Thank you so much, everybody, for playing along and being excited about Colombo. It's really a best case scenario for Joe.
Yeah, I want to say thank you again to both Ben and Ross for being good sports and enthusiastic about this, weird thing of mine, but also to the community. We got so many good questions and comments and responses to this that, I mean, like I said, I couldn't even get through them all. There was so much that I thought was like cool, insightful stuff about the show, and people who are clearly also enthusiastic about Colombo, which makes me feel good. So happy Columbo's Day to everyone.
One down, 68 episodes to go, guys.
That's right. 68 more years. 68 more years. Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.
If you are sick of snark, clickbait, and an avalanche of movie news, you can help support independent games media by subscribing to MinnMax's YouTube channel here or checking out the benefits over on Patreon. It's a nice, clean handshake. You support us, and we won't make dumb, condescending stuff for you. Your support helps us continue our mission of focusing on games, friends, and getting better. Patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. We'd appreciate it.